All right. So, Andrew, what is going on? And then above it says, woo congressional hearing because of the mayor. It's actually kind of interesting how that happens. All right. Andrew, you have like an idealized version of what you would like to have happen this offseason with the Patriots, correct?
I mean, independent of that article you just referenced, but yes.
Yes. Independent of the article I just referenced, what would be an ideal offseason now as we sit after the combine?
So Ronnie Stanley is number one on my list of this dream scenario for the Patriots, left tackle for the Ravens. Give him 2 years, almost all guaranteed, somewhere in the ballpark of $20, $22 million. Come in, be a professional, be an above average left tackle with a peak of maybe top 10. Chris Godwin would be number 2, but let's say this is, not completely perfect plan. I would not just kick the tires on a DK Metcalf trade. I would really push for a DK Metcalf trade, a second, a future third. And then later in the draft, fellas, if I'm at number 4, fingers crossed, both quarterbacks go, 1, 2, 1, 3, 2, 3, whatever it might be. I move back from 4 and then recoup a third-round pick that I lost in the DK Metcalf trade. So you sign the best left tackle, you get the best receiver available via trade, you still stay within the top 10 to make a good pick in what's a kind of draft, and you only gave up a second-round pick in the process to get DK Metcalf as your new number 1 wide receiver.
All right. And are you confident that, because your last article is very critical of the inside of the Patriots organization, do you think Vrabel has stabilized things enough?
I do.
Go ahead.
Yes. Everyone we talked to in the front office, and this was not, folks publicly going on the record about their boss, because you'll see there are plenty of unnamed team sources in there. They're blown away by Vrabel. Like the things that they're saying about him, smartest coach I've ever worked with, unbelievable capacity to juggle scouting reports for college players, coaching hirings, pro personnel, everything involves salary cap. It sounds Belichickian, so they love him. I think it will take time, and they've already started to make changes, as we mentioned in there. Like Vrabel's even gotten the Crafts to pay more for assistants to move and to have relocation allowances. So I think he's making change. He's got the power. It's just going to take a little bit of time.
Because the article that you and Doug Hyde came out with, I mean, the organization seems real cheap.
Yeah, I mean, fellas, like it even gets this granular. Like 10, 12, maybe 15 years ago, there were towels in the locker room that were solid navy blue, right? The Patriots, navy blue colors that you have come to learn and the folks listening have come to love. If you go into the locker room 2-3 years ago, hell, some of them might still be there today. Those towels are light purple because of how often they've been washed. So it's a lot of things in there. And some of it was Belichick. Some of it is just an ownership group that's not had to make any big changes like we've seen with coaches over the years, that's out of touch with the salaries and, like I said, the moving allowances. But the other part is you're just not investing as much as other teams are around the league in very basic things for your franchise.
Do you think that's I mean, you can give other examples. I mean, the plane thing and everything else. Do you think that's because I used to give the Crafts the benefit of the doubt because of Belichick was overseeing and everything, and maybe they didn't have it down to that kind of minutia. But the more I'm hearing about it, and the more I hear from guys like you and some other guys, it sounds like the Crafts are kind of interested in being the best businessmen as owners a little bit more than I thought.
Yeah, and I don't think that is necessarily wrong, Fred, right? As you put it, like businessmen stay rich because they operate in the same mindset that got them rich in the first place. But what I would say is that, yes, I'm with you. It's not that I was giving them the benefit of the doubt. I just had such a strict focus earlier in my career, even the last couple of seasons, about the salary cap and money and how much were they allowed to spend. No front office member has ever told me when I asked them that they were put a limit on the cash that they were allowed to spend on the roster. Now, because there's a roster or a salary cap floor, that's not necessarily indicative, in my opinion, of things that would reflect which owners around the league are businessmen who are more willing to invest financially and obviously in their personnel beyond that. Because to me, those are things that don't have a salary cap or floor. We don't have a towel salary cap, okay? We don't have a plane salary cap, but they've chosen to retain the same towels or planes from the last 15, 20 years, where you have players complaining year after year after year in those changes. So to me, when you talk about a cheap ownership group, you could go to the cash spending, which is bottom 10 in the league over the last 11, 12 years, or everything else. And all things, in my view, as I've grown closer to this, point to being cheap.
Okay, so how did they think Mayo was going to in any way succeed? Because another thing is the intrigue of when they found out they were going to get let go and how that affected things. Did they legitimately think under these kinds of parameters that he could succeed?
Yes, but I think what that showed was just a completely clouded judgment and flawed process. Like, you remember Robert Kraft saying on the record last year that the moment he decided Gerard Mayo would be his head coach, this is information he volunteered, was in an airport terminal in Israel as they're coming back because he looks over and Gerard's just chatting with a bunch of expatriates from different eras. That trip happened before Gerard Mayo coached his first training camp practice. Coaching was something that Bill Belichick had to recruit Gerard Mayo into doing in the first place because he was around Optum and hanging out and doing media and doing a great job at NBC Sports Boston. So that person, as talented and I think natural Gerard is as a leader, then only gets 5 years of experience. But because he's the guy they pegged from day one and had this utmost belief in, not only in him, but their ability to identify coaches, Pete Carroll, Bill Belichick, Bill Parcells, without any kind of error. So it was just an arrogance, an overconfidence in Gerard's abilities, in his growth and development, and in their own. And it was too late to make any changes when they realized it. So they just pulled the ripcord and went with Mike Vrabel as opposed to saying, hey, even in year two, this probably isn't going to be that great with Gerard Mayo.
Do you think that he could be embarrassed? I mean, I don't even know who's in charge anymore, but Robert or Jonathan, that this is embarrassing enough for them to kind of change their ways? Or is the club of NFL owners' priorities a little bit different than we expect? It's not all about winning Super Bowls.
Yeah, it's a good question, Fred. I think to number two, I think we always overestimate how much these guys want to win, right? Like the Nuggets and the Rams are both owned by the same owners, the Kroenkes. And the Nuggets never go into the luxury tax in the NBA, or very rarely. The Rams are not at the top of the cash spender. So it just so happens that the Kroenkes want to win. But is that a result of them setting a kind of a cultural tone? No. You lucked into a generational coach in Sean McVay, the best player in the NBA, Nikola Jokic. That's not a result of your spending or wisdom or finances. So what I would say as far as the Crafts, it's a good question because last year at this time, when we get the NFLPA report cards and we're all diving in, the headline of my column was, will this be enough to shame the Crafts? And since then, they have announced a new football facility, $50 million. The timing is interesting in that will open right before the World Cup comes to Gillette Stadium in summer of 2026. And the Patriots will obviously not be able to use some of their facilities. We'll see about that. And beyond that, like the plane is still here. They actually went from 27th to 31st. So my answer might be no, but we'll see because we know they have bunny ears. Like they're listening and feel the pressure of the local media in a way that I can tell you some owners don't. They definitely do.
Yeah, and that's what's the weird about it, right? Is that I know that they're hyper-focused on what people are saying about them, but yet, you know, their interests might not be in line of what we're talking about. Like we just said, the fans and the media are very interested in winning, and that's it. You know, when you're an owner, you're interested in profit and how much your organization is worth and things like that. It's just this offseason is the first time I've really thought it in that perspective. I've always thought that owners are just billionaires that buy teams because they want to be loved.
Yeah.
I didn't really think that, oh, no, there's a game within the game, and that game is look at how we're winning despite not spending. There's like another variable in it.
Yeah, and I would say this, and you know, if you want to defend the Crafts, I think this is a logical case. If you have Bill Belichick doing a certain style of business for 23 years, and that yields the greatest dynasty in NFL history, why would you change course? And we know that Bill offered his front office members, his assistant coaches, tiny salaries as a way of testing them. You come in, you work here. I know you'll want it if you do this for, you know, in the early days, 20 grand and you're a scout and you're working almost 20 hours a week. So when they get handed the franchise back after meddling some in the later years, they just try to copy and paste some of those practices, but there's no draw for those coaches here. And in fact, there was great offense. Some assistant coaches on staff last year, I heard, took offense to like the moving allowance, being like, wait, I have how long to find a new house? Well, I move on free agency in the draft for you and my family's away and I have to do this. And to that point, I just don't think they were in touch with modern practices, but you can be. It just takes a couple of phone calls and some research when you replace the head coach and everything that he did, which is why I think they brought in Vrabel to essentially be Belichick again, to trust him to handle everything.
Yeah,
it seems like something that would pop up immediately when you're having conversations with a coach bringing in here. Like, what are you talking about? Well, give me 2 weeks.
I had 3 days when I moved from Atlanta, but that's CBS. But it is that was the same thing, Andrew, that we talked about at the beginning when we started talking about your article. Is that I had always thought, look, the Krafts just let Belichick run stuff, and things like the family conditions during the game, like the family room during the game, like how the hell are they going to know, right? Like that's something that's below their pay grade. But now you're talking about planes and facilities and coaches' salaries. I mean, that's all stuff that you have to. There's only 31 other people you got to look to. I mean, there's a structure of an organization, the way business is done, and it sounds to me like the Krafts were kind of flexing, like, look at how much we're winning and look at how little we're spending. And now it's kind of come home to roost, and they're going to have to in a little bit. Is this fair? Swallow a little bit of pride and start spending more money.
Yeah, I think that's well put. And honestly, I think it should have happened a while ago too, because you mentioned the 31 other franchises. Guys, like, do you remember when they went to Las Vegas and they had joint practices? And Belichick's big comment that week was, "Oh, this is the Taj Mahal of football facilities." Yeah. Oh my God. That comment was, update the weight room, Robert. What are we doing? And then afterward, as Doug and I reported at the time, that, part of the delay around the weight room was that they asked Matt Patricia to do it. I don't know, maybe hire an architect or someone whose job it is to design these rooms and handle it. Not the guy who's like your pseudo offensive coordinator and Bill Belichick's assistant, but that's how they operated. Like there has been, I think, a shock for them in terms of the feedback and the media reception. But the bottom line is, if you're the owners, and you have all of the money, and you are the boss to literally everyone else in football operations, everything that happens underneath you is your responsibility. So when you want to point a finger, as people were doing not only in this article, but our end of season piece, talking about organizational rot, you point the finger at the Krafts.
Yeah, and there's a lot to get into with the end of season piece and this most recent one too, Andrew. And you just one more thing, which is a whole nother layer. We've talked about Robin Glazer before and how couldn't really figure out who she was or what she did. It seemed like even she had like this dichotomy going on where she was in there to do things the opposite of Bill, but was also tasked with cutting costs in areas. And it's like, well, I don't know how you accomplish both of those things, but what came of it was this, continued disorganization and really dysfunction that got them maybe to where they are now.
Yeah, I mean, well, she landed a job at Doge, so I think she's doing okay.
Oh, good for her.
Wow.
Oh, good.
I'm kidding. I'm teasing. Do not cite that to the Boston Herald. But
who knows? I didn't know you were kidding. Who knows? I don't know what's going on. I'm not tied in. Look, we got a break. Adam was very rude before about it. Andrew, it is interesting.
What I just said in here now.
And
do you want 15 seconds on Glazer, though, just to wrap up? Because Doug's had additional reporting. It's much more than cost cutting. Like, there were times that people described her as kind of someone who didn't know what she was doing within football operations, actually paid assistant coaches too much. If you want to know more, listen to Doug's podcast, Pat's Chat. Follow us, obviously. Like, some people described her as a nightmare. Other people liked her in the building. But ultimately, she was no good for football operations, as we saw last year. So it was more than cost cutting.
All right. And by the way, look at the renderings of this new $50 million facility and then put it up against what's in Vegas and Baltimore, and it's a joke. All right. Andrew, thank you so much, sir.
For more Patriots analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. And for all the latest from the Sports Hub, download the app at 985thesportshub.com.